All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the convening of the EDC. It is June 4th, 2024. And I will turn it over to Kurt for roll call.
Sure. So this is a meeting of the June 4th, 2024 Economic Development Commission meeting. It's about 4 minutes after 4. And the first order of business, and this has been posted with, in adherence to the open door law. I'm looking for the right word. I just wanted to state that. All right. So let's do number 1, which is a roll call. And I'm proud to say that we have a full members all here today. So Cheryl, you want to start?
Cheryl Munson here.
Tim Hankey here.
Vanessa McClary here.
Isak Asari here.
And Kurt Zorn, I think I'm here too. So. All right, we have approval of the minutes for the April 2024 meeting. Anybody have any corrections or additions to make to that?
We're incredibly short.
Yeah.
It looks like you guys
The best
have
type.
one thing.
Yeah.
It goes right to the point.
I will move approval.
Second?
You want to arm wrestle for this? No.
You get up pretty early in the morning.
All right. Any discussion? If not, I think we can just say aye if we are in favor of approval.
Aye.
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 Aye. So we got unanimity. All right. Moving right through the agenda. We're on number 3, which is new business, which is the annual tax abatement presentation and review. And I think I'm going to turn this over to Dee.
Well, I was going to flip it over to Jane, but I don't know where Jane is now.
We'll let Dee start.
She ran out of here. Let me open this up on my computer really quick. Sorry, guys. So we I'm gonna flip through here. I'm hoping that this is the one with. No, she doesn't have. Oh, they should have it open. Hold on a second. So sorry. I'm not in my file. I'm in Jane's. Hi, Jane.
It ran out of paper, so that's the back of your packet.
Thank you.
You're up, buddy.
Oh, cool. So can you pull up the slide deck? Or just scroll through? We read through, that's, here, I'll just do it.
Yeah, because I don't know where you're. Are you logged into yours or?
This is just the packet.
Okay, gotcha.
We went through these in a fair amount of detail during our last meeting.
Gotcha.
So I was planning today to just read through the presentation that I'll give to council next week. I'd like to go cruise through the introductory slides and the overview, the aggregate data, and then, of course, take questions. And then I thought one by one we will walk through each individual abatement together. Does that sound like a plan? Mm-hmm. Okay. So here we are. It's the kickoff of what is officially summer in Bloomington. It's tax abatement compliance season. So, yay. We reviewed some of this material, but roles and responsibilities and tax abatement approvals, the Economic Development Commission reviews and recommends them. Common Council authorizes them, and the Monroe County administers them. The City of Bloomington General Standards award tax abatements or allow tax abatements based on the creation of capital investment as an enhancement to the tax base. Okay, this is the part we wanted to reword. Significantly increases full-time permanent living wage jobs, significantly increases existing wages, or creates affordable housing units. So it's one of the 3. So it's an enhancement to the tax base and then an additional one of these 3 following. Review criteria adopted in 2023 to acknowledge affordable housing projects. I think this was adopted in 2021, actually. So maybe I'll correct that in the final. Overview of the compliance process, annual reporting. So each recipient of a tax abatement is required to file CF1s, compliance form 1s, annually. It's filed with the county auditor and the county clerk. ESD is given the responsibility to compile and report to the Economic Development Commission. And then the Economic Development Commission forwards a final report and recommendation to Common Council for any action. So Common Council will have a range of actions that they can take. They can approve as we recommend. They can request additional information in a hearing if they believe that more information is needed. And then they can choose to deny a tax abatement or approve it. They could choose to, is that the full range, Larry?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Evaluative criteria and process. Other evaluative criteria considered during the application process, quality of life and environmental sustainability. Obviously, these are super important for all of us. Quality of life is economic development, so that's why it's the first one listed. Affordable housing, which is obviously our current largest constraint on our economic growth. Community service and community character, which can refer to art, local business, historic preservation, or any other number of areas that would impact our local character. Evaluative criteria and process, this is kind of going back again a step, but ESD receives an application, formal application and statement of benefits, form SB1, and we review those. We only forward you the good ones. We don't forward you ones that are not approvable. So we review those as a team and make sure that they're aligned with our economic development priorities. If they are, then they come to you. You review them and make a formal recommendation to Common Council. Just like us, if you don't agree that they're aligned and you do not recommend them, then Common Council won't see them. So the first step is the approval of an economic revitalization area or economic development target area, if appropriate, and the abatement term and schedule is part of your recommendation. Common Council would approve a designating resolution, and that would include formalizing any of the terms related to quality of life that need to be considered in the compliance process. Abatements allow for the phase-in of new property taxes. So all are part of the new assessed value, increase in assessed value exempted from paying property tax. Could be the reduction of tax liability on added AV only. Okay, this is sort of redundant, but for improvements only. The terms can be for real property from 1 to 10 years, and they can go up to 20 years for personal property. So the Catalan 2206 personal property abatement is an example of one of those super abatements that goes to 20 years. I think that was a first for us in Bloomington. And it's a sliding scale, so can be from 100% of exemption from the increase in new assessed value down to 0. Obviously, 0 would be like the final year of the abatement. And the designating body may provide an alternative deduction schedule. So the state provides a standard schedule, but the designated body can edit that as they see fit. Sorry, I thought we had some summary data.
You did in the packet, the updated one.
This is the updated packet, I thought. Okay. Sorry, folks. Okay, well, this is not the
Jane,
correct
in the one-
packet.
in the one
Oh,
you
I
sent
am
us-
so sorry.
That's okay.
In the one you sent us, we do have 4 slides with regard to the
Yeah,
economic
I'm gonna
impact.
send it to you right now.
Well, can I just present the slide deck?
You should be able to.
I'm just gonna go in here. Everybody, look at my stuff. Oh, did you just send it? Did you email it? Or chat it?
You asked for the most updated packet, and I stuck it in that file link that you sent me.
Okay. Sorry, everyone. I don't know why that was not. Look at that, Dee. Using my stars.
There we go.
Okay, this is what I was looking for. So the summary data, so mixed use,
Jane,
yeah.
you need to present your screen for
Thanks.
the person on Zoom.
It takes a village. Okay. All right, this is probably hard to read for them, but sorry. So mixed use, there was 11.5 million proposed in new SB1 investment, and we saw that investment. Commercial real estate, 56 million was anticipated on the SB1s, and that has reached 11,382,577. This is the summary, so this is all the abatements rolled up based on their category. For commercial personal property, we have allowed and anticipate receiving $450 million in new investment, and the current level is $169,117,571. So getting there. For residential, it is $21,246,130 anticipated on the SB1s, and actual of $28,891,875. So the total allowed by the program, or the total anticipated investment based on SB1s, is $538,746,130. And the actual investment reported to date is $220,892,023. So this is largely because some of the investments, the significant catalyst investments, are still in process, and then we'll review one by one, but others may not have reached their threshold. This does not mean that we're giving away any benefits that we haven't received. It means that they're only receiving the benefit on the increment, so yeah. Total jobs, new and retained jobs are 2,406 for the total value of the program, and then the total salaries new and retained were 195,324,412. That's actual.
Could I ask a question about the point before? I was just processing it and then thought about thought about something. So when we issue tax abatements, we issue them on a criteria that was based on a sort of qualitative criteria in many ways, based on sort of the impact of the investment. But then the abatement, and I understand this mechanism, the abatement only applies to the investment that's actually made, right? So for example, if we're giving them, like at the Catalan property, they're saying, hey, we're gonna invest $100 million to expand. We're giving them an abatement on that additional tax that they would have been paying on the increase, right? Now, but the assessment, the decision is made based on the impact of the overall investment.
Which assessment do you
Like
mean?
when we
like
first
our evaluation?
Yeah, when we first evaluate it to say yes or no to the abatement in the first place, it's based on the overall view of how many jobs, how much investment, et cetera, right?
Yep.
So then is that not a little bit of a disconnect? Like then,
Well,
right?
we'll get there. We're going to review individual job numbers for each investment,
Right, okay.
and then we'll, for the ones where, you know how I mentioned that the quality of life, quality of place, those are incorporated in the resolutions.
Right.
So then we'll also look at those for the 3 abatements that have housing numbers, and we consider those together as well.
Awesome.
So, does that address the question?
Yeah, totally.
Okay.
And it also is a broader thought for discussion for like this whole committee later, is thinking about, just like, this is a total digression, so the sort of all other comments at the end point
No, it's
that
great.
this will sort of lead to later, but.
I think what you're getting at is like, does the measuring stick actually measure the thing that we're trying to achieve?
Right. And should we, is there a way, one of my soapboxes has been that we want to give a lot of certainty to people who do business in Bloomington, and perhaps one of the ways that we might think about moving towards is like having more of like a menu, like, it's like, buy us a school, you get a tax abatement, like a clearer, so anyways, that's sort of the thought that I'm exploring.
So,
And my example was a bad one, but whatever.
Cheryl, did you have a question?
I did have a question, because I've done this for the county council, for the county tax abatements, but something new here for me is the residential tax
Yes.
abatement. Is that the affordable housing component?
Those are workforce housing.
Workforce.
Well, no, 2 of them are affordable and 1 is workforce. Yeah.
Okay,
Which are just different levels of income and rent.
Mhm.
yeah,
Yep.
okay, thank you.
So we don't have a ton of those. And we've learned
New to me.
that we don't really have a large abatement program compared to some of our peers in the state. We're
Mhm.
pretty choosy about
Yeah, that's
the
interesting.
abatements that we issue.
Yeah, right, you can. So, as a member of this committee, I have received housing tax credits, or tax credits for affordable housing.
Uh-huh.
And it's absolutely crucial for building affordable housing.
Right.
Yes.
I agree.
But
Yes, it
when you
is.
say
So then
credits,
we can
do you
know
mean
that.
abatements?
Abatements,
Yeah.
yes, and credits. Done
That's
both.
correct, credits is different.
Done both. But, for example, a typical apartment in the city of Bloomington that we own on Sarah Road,
Mhm.
we pay, this is not covered by any tax abatements, but we pay a little over $200 per month per bedroom in property taxes.
Mhm.
200 per
So
month
on a
per
2-bedroom apartment, we're paying over $400 a month in property taxes.
Mhm.
How low can you go on rent if you're paying $400 a month in
Yeah.
property
Right.
taxes alone?
Right.
Right, right.
Okay. I
So,
just-
so that's,
Yeah.
that's the disconnect, I feel like, in the county,
Yeah,
and we need
that's
to do more of it in the
interesting.
city.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Well, and between us, we don't have any asks.
And the internet.
I know.
And the internet.
I don't think we're supposed to be sarcastic in government meetings, but we don't have any asks on the table. But given the Hopewell development, which is starting to kick off again, we'll be releasing the public offering hopefully within the next couple of weeks.
Mhm.
And those responses to the public offering won't have specific incentive requests, I don't think. But I would imagine that over the coming years, we
Yeah.
see an uptick in requests for
Yeah.
residential
Right, yeah,
abatements related to that.
Mhm.
And potentially for other developments as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
This is a great conversation. So the average new and retained salary is $81,182. So that's a good figure for Bloomington. Okay, economic impact of the abatements. Proposed new assessed value on the SB1, mixed use was 0. Okay, the reason this is 0 is because that this specific mixed-use abatement is related to New Urban Station, which we reviewed
Mhm.
last month.
time, right.
They filed late in 2023,
Mhm.
2022, and so did not receive the benefit for 2023. So it's zeroed out because its prior year was not filed. However, the SB1 amount, which is related to the application, right, Larry? I think this field should say 11,500,000.
Whatever the application.
So we'll correct that for the council presentation. But I do know that's why that's zeroed out. Okay, and then commercial real estate, on SB1's 4,200,000, and then actual is 14,200,000. And actual is 100,984,000. I can tell you this is dwarfed because I believe Catalent reported their 2206 investment on their 1904 CF1. So we're currently talking with the county to see if we should file as is this year, right now, and then make a correction later. So I think for this board, or for this commission, the point is that the initial amount was exceeded. So,
Can you explain the difference between slide, are we, what's the difference between slide, just 2 slides up and
That's the
this?
assessed value on the slide we just looked at, and that has the new investment that was proposed.
so new investment here, and comparing
Oh,
AV
got
to
it.
new
Okay,
improvements.
yep.
I mean, this could be one table, so maybe it will become that. Commercial personal property, New AV on the SB1 is 44 million, and then the actual is 60,695,11. Again, that's because Catalan abatements 2206 and 1904 were conflated this year, which we are tracking. Residential proposed new assessed value is 10,960,996, and then actual is 9,470,800. I don't know that I'm finding this table particularly useful, actually. So we're not comparing apples to apples, because
I'm making a note.
improvements are controlled by the developer, investor, and AV is really a market response. So, but for our
What would be helpful,
information.
Jane, is if you actually had the proposed new
A-
assessed value and the
yeah,
actual
yeah.
assessed value.
Yeah,
Right.
That would be the more,
Yeah, I
that would be the
agree.
more useful
In one table.
data.
so,
But that's not critical, it just,
no,
for
and we
future.
have it, so we'll just update it for the final presentation. And then this little table is just an overview of housing. So we have 3 residential abatements. This looked at all of the units, so you can see there's a wide range in terms of size. So the 10 units at New Urban Station were for workforce housing. The average AMI was 56%, so they were not required to go that low, I don't believe, and they did, so that's pretty cool. 0 vacancies at the time of reporting. Southern Knoll is extremely affordable, on average at 25%, 31 units, 2 vacancies, which is well below. I think the average, actually, Tim, you could probably tell us, but the average vacancy rate for Bloomington, I think, is around 6%.
This year's gonna be different, but yeah, that probably was right last year,
Do you think it's going to be higher this year, or?
yes.
Okay,
A lot of new units.
okay.
Gosh.
Good to know. And then Union at Crescent, average AMI is 60%. That's 146 units required, and then they had more affordable units than they were required, and 0 vacancies. And this AMI is higher because it includes the total units, and they have some market rate units mixed in. Okay, economic impact. Larry, you were maybe going to offer some color commentary here. The but-for threshold means that no investment would be possible without the support of the tax abatement. So the idea is that we're delivering relief from the incremental tax in the short term for long-term community benefits and an increase in paid taxes in the long haul.
The only thing I'd note is but-for is actually not a test found in the statute. The statute's a little bit more nuanced than that. It's been described by some as a but-for test, but actually the criteria in the statute, just to be really clear, is that the designated property before you designate it as a revitalization area has either become undesirable for development or development is impossible. To say that it's a but-for test with possibility is to take 1/2 of that equation and not count the other half. So that's the color commentary that I would offer, just in terms of when you think this isn't a traditional but-for test, it's a little bit more, it's a little broader than that. Because some people want to narrow abatements as much as possible, so they'll lean in on the but-for test, which is reasonable if you want to do that as a policy matter, but as a statutory matter, not required.
So we're doing it as a policy matter more,
Well, may I ask?
or we're not doing it, I see what you're saying.
That's only going to apply when this group considers abatements,
A
correct?
new abatement, that's
Yeah,
right.
so at this
That's
point in
right.
time, it's,
And it's a case-by-case basis, that's what you're talking about. Is this property particularly undesirable, and would this facilitate the type of development that we have under the criteria?
okay.
Yeah,
So we should have this discussion a lot more.
absolutely, I just want to point it out.
Yeah.
So in the future, when we inevitably do have this discussion,
Sure.
we're primed for it.
This slide has a little bit of math just to help illustrate the impact. So example of the impact of tax abatements on individual taxes, so that would be other taxpayers within the county or within the city, is assuming a flat levy is the given. Total Bloomington net assets, net assessed value at $4.2 billion. So if we offered 100% abatement on a $10 million increase in assessed value, that would have a 0.2% impact on the overall tax rate. This is someone else's math, just FYI. I think it's Alex's.
I think it's Alex's.
Yeah, just having,
might pull it.
having looked at economic development and tax abatements from a conceptual basis, the but-for tests and so forth, to me, it's interesting because the literature doesn't really demonstrate that there's no real cause and effect about economic development occurring because of abatements. Now, that doesn't mean that the abatements don't do something, but it's hard to prove that they actually end up increasing economic development. I just want to note that, and I worry about this example because I have to think about this a little bit more. I think
Yeah.
that's a little bit misleading.
Maybe we could keep talking
Yeah.
about it. I think I'll pull it from the.
Yeah, and I wonder why it's here.
I wouldn't leave that in there because that's going to raise more questions. I really think we need to think through this better.
Yeah, I think it's just was in the slide deck for additional context.
Yeah.
Which is fine.
Which is
If
the
you
one
could-
that's in?
Sorry?
Which is the one to be removed?
This whole economic impact of
We think this is not relevant to the compliance discussion,
Okay.
so.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
I think
It's a
you're gonna
consideration
invite
when
a
you're
discussion.
actually
But
recommending.
we'll
that.
have a rich discussion about all of the above
Yes.
when we're considering a
Our
new
meeting
abatement.
has
That's
that.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, that's great.
And it can be written a lot
But the
differently.
Common Council doesn't need to have that discussion right now.
Okay.
No, certainly not.
So, then getting into the individual abatements, the first one is Southern Knoll Milestone Ventures. This is at 1107 West 3rd Street and is the 31-unit affordable housing complex. It's a partnership with Beacon and Life Designs. Beacon is actually managing 10 permanent supportive housing units in this development right now. So 31 units. The public benefits are what we put in the resolution in the MOU. These are the additional requirements beyond the investments and jobs. So 31 units at or below 80% AMI. 75% of those units, or 24 of them, would be at or below 60% AMI. So that's just giving, we wanted the majority of them to be below 60, but we gave them a little wiggle room. 7 were set aside for Beacon. They've vested that at 10, and 7 are set aside for individuals with developmental disabilities, and those are supported by Life Designs. Current status, the improvements are complete and the property is occupied. We find them to be compliant with their abatement commitments. This is just a little more detail on the types of units that they're renting, and kind of, in the past, we had always communicated with Housing and Neighborhood Development and had them attest that the developers were meeting the abatement requirements, but we didn't have visibility into the data. Now we do, which is great, and so we're just sharing that. I don't really think I need to read through all of the table, but the average tenant income is pretty interesting because it shows us that people who are really living close to the ground are benefiting from this. They included information on the additional subsidies, so that could be like housing choice voucher or other subsidies. So we're listing the rent rates, but this is to say that individuals with an average income of $14,990 are getting rent paid in other ways. Total units are 31. Vacancy is, it is at 6%, which is the current average. Yeah.
And just that, because I mean, I've obviously seen the thing, so I'm ahead. The next one is directly the answer to the question.
Yeah.
But what is the relevance of the previous information to the assessment of compliance?
So it's really, for these housing ones, it's a 2-step. And that is that they have to meet the commitment to investment and jobs that they reported on their application.
Right.
And then they have to meet the terms that we listed in the MOU.
Which includes
based
things like
on
tenant income and.
Well, based on our MOU, it includes what is in this slide. So all of these. And then this slide is just for your information. This is just context showing, the details showing that they are complying with these 4 items. So I included the income just to show you all
What
the
we're
types
talking
of
about,
families
yeah.
and individuals.
And I also have a question.
Yeah.
So why do we feel they have 2 vacancies?
Why do we?
Why do they have 2 vacancies? I would,
Yes, so what I've been told is that this is a point in time, this was just at the time of their filing, and that none of these places are hanging out with vacancies long-term. And so we include that 6% rate to show that's the average Bloomington vacancy rate. And what I've been told, which Tim may be able to confirm, is that that's just the average churn. So that
it's
would
just
be
turnover period.
turnover period. So
Okay.
it's really, yeah, you almost might call that a 0% rate, because it's not like 4 or 6% of units are available for lease. It's just that
Consistently,
6% are in transition.
That's
going
very helpful.
from-
Okay.
Yeah.
thank you.
Do you agree with that
Oh,
that
absolutely.
summary?
Yeah,
Okay.
if you have 31 apartments on any given day, you'd expect 1 to be vacant at least, or
Mhm.
2, somebody moved out, you're cleaning it, painting it, and 2 weeks and somebody moves back in.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I think this is important because we need to make sure that we're not giving the benefits away without the delivery of the terms. Okay. So again, this is a real property abatement. It is a 10-year abatement at 98%, 98%, and so it's in year 4 currently. Would you like me to read through the numbers? I've been
No,
doing
I
that
don't
just
need
for the
that.
purpose of the meeting, but, okay. So again.
That
staff-
basically shows that the compliance to the commitments is across the
Right there.
board.
Yes, yeah, they've beat all the requirements. Okay, great. So
Okay.
union.
So
Mhm.
just to pick you, then assessed value, why don't you have compliant for that? Because that's,
Well, I took it off because because the assessed value is assigned, so they don't get to decide what their assessed value is going to
Oh,
be.
so
They
you-
get to decide how many jobs they're providing and what investment they're making.
I get it.
So the AV is what we expect to receive,
understood, okay.
yeah. I'm happy to add it back in, but
But it's not something
It's not a
that, it's not
test.
something that we have any decision-making on.
Right.
It is
they don't
what it
have
is.
control over it.
So maybe you put something like exceeds expectations or something. like that,
Yeah.
Because you're expecting 1 million and you've got 1.7, almost
Yeah.
1.8.
Okay,
I think that's a good point.
To emphasize
Because
that
it's-
we're getting more
it
EV
shows
than we were
value.
expecting.
Yeah.
yeah. Happy to do that.
I was just also going to say on the first one with the MOU criteria, it might be really useful to identify with the rooms on the side, like which ones are the Beacon rooms, et cetera, because we say 7 units for Beacon, 7 units, the life design, with the criteria.
You mean at what AMI those rooms are rented at?
No, just saying, so we have a chart underneath that says, there's 31 rooms, and it's saying that it is compliant because there's 10 of those that are Beacon and 7 of those that are life design. I'm just thinking ahead to
That's a
the
good
way that the
question.
council meeting is going to go,
Yeah,
right?
and
So
I'm-
that there's not actually any follow through with
Okay.
that the 10, if we can make clear,
Okay.
these are the 10, these are the 7 somehow, if possible,
Okay.
graphically is
Yeah.
useful, but.
I'm going to assume they're all studios and 1-bedrooms, but let me try
Right,
to
right,
answer
right,
that really
exactly.
specifically. Thanks.
So-
Good feedback.
Eliminating the possibility for questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or be prepared when the
Thank
question
you.
comes, so you can answer
So
the
Are you
here it is,
able to
right there.
take notes about?
I've been doing this the whole time.
Okay, Union at Crescent, this is on the northwest side of Bloomington, sort of, so it's a 146 5-story multifamily mixed, affordable and market rate. So this is interesting. Some of my corrections, because I corrected it to no fewer than 70% or 102 units allocated to households with incomes at or below 60%, so the bulk of them are all 60% and below, and then no fewer than 20% will be market rate. So it's just setting the limits. We find them compliant,
Look at that.
and then here we are on the housing stats. No vacancies, which again, I think tells you how much
Wow.
need there is for
No
this type of
kidding.
housing in our
And
community.
the income level is,
The income level's low. The subsidy here is low. So the income level is only talking about, this is not apples to apples. So the income level is looking at the subsidized units only, because the market rate units do not report their income level.
oh, okay.
And then the subsidy should also just be the supported units, but I think it might be all of the units averaged, so that probably should be corrected. Total units are 198. 38 of those units are market rate, 160 are affordable. So again, they're way above that 146 baseline, which is great. Again, we find them compliant in all areas of the requirements. Does anybody have questions about Union at Crescent?
Mm-mm.
Okay, and then Urban Station, I may just skip this one, you've
Yeah.
already approved and
We did
recommended
it.
it, but we
Yeah.
included it for context and so that its data would be rolled up.
And it should, sorry,
You're
I'm
fine.
processing slowly. On Union Crescent, I think you said this out loud, but just making sure I heard it correctly. It should say no more than 20% at market rate, correct?
No less than 20%.
Just, she was correcting less than fewer,
No,
because of the grammar.
no less.
Than
No fewer
20%.
than 20.
Right.
So if I
So
read
they've
that,
got
it means they could
10%
have-
that can-
They could have 30% because there's no less than 70% of below AMI, so they can go between 20 and 30% for market rate.
They can, okay, so they
If
can
I'm
go
reading- If I'm reading
between,
it correctly.
but, so,
I think it's a great question. Maybe we should ask Jane, what do you mean to say by no less than 20%
Well,
of the units?
I believe this language is pulled from the
Right,
resolution.
directly from the MOU or
And
whatever.
so I think what it's doing is it's saying, this is a mixed
Yeah.
income
Okay.
housing development. So at least
There'll be
20,
20%
at
that
least
are
20%
market
are
rate,
gonna be market rate.
and at least there's a floor of 70% that are income.
So at least
Yeah.
70.
So that
So
little
there's
10% in
10%
between
can flex.
can go to either market rate or to the other is the way I
Yeah.
read it.
That's what I would read too.
Yeah.
It's a strange thing to say, but we all agree, right? Like, why
Yeah.
not just say, why not just say that you need it to be 70% affordable?
Well, because she's pulling it out of the.
No, I'm not talking about what Jane has said, I'm just thinking about the resolution in the first place.
Yeah,
but,
well,
like,
I mean,
it's like-
no, it's really important that it's kind of honoring the fact that this is a mixed
Right.
income establishment, which is really important because we
I see-
don't
I
want
see.
our
I get what
lower
you're
income
saying. Yeah.
residents to be isolated and only
I
living.
see, so
Yeah.
it was purposefully saying, actually,
Yeah.
we do want
Yeah.
at least 20% of it.
We
That makes, okay,
appreciate that these are market rate.
That makes sense to me,
Yeah.
yes. and
So it's a financial benefit to the developer because it offsets the costs, and then it's a community benefit to the residents.
No,
But
I think
I had
we-
to read it multiple
I
times.
think that we have 19% market rate though. 38 divided by 198, is that not 19%?
Are you looking here?
No, at the bottom, looking at the total properties.
Oh, that they've gone too far into,
That they need.
Too affordable.
I'm sorry,
Right.
which,
It's a strange thing to say out loud.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, if they have 38 market rate units and they have 198 properties,
Okay.
that's only 19%.
okay. So what I would say in this instance.
And this is the next one, not this one.
Yeah.
Next one down.
Union
It's
Crescent.
this one, yeah.
Okay, so what I would say in this instance then is I would find them substantially compliant with the requirements of the tax abatement. And I can communicate with the property manager via hand to find
That
out.
they need- that they need-
Yeah, I
that they
can
need
find out
one
where they
half of
are
of
right
a
now.
room. Yeah.
Jane, can I make one other suggestion? I think if you're consistent I would just consistently communicate units.
Okay.
You know, you have
Yes.
to have 50 units or 15
Exactly.
units or whatever, not percentages and units.
Right,
It gets, because then you start, you don't know if it's a percentage of a percentage,
right.
you know.
Well,
it-
but it's tricky because some developments require multiple percentages, right?
Well, but always you can calculate out how many units that is,
Yeah.
and you just lock it down.
So you're saying, just to be clear, you're saying that I should just describe them and not include all the full picture, or?
No.
That I
so-
should just
so when we-
summarize?
When we did it, we had a similar scenario.
Okay.
But the percentage was like 12 and a half units. And so in the MOU, we said 12 or 13, I don't
Oh.
remember what we did.
Yeah,
So we just
yeah.
locked it down on the number of units and we were done with it.
And so you're suggesting that as a recommendation for how we word our resolutions going forward?
Yeah, maybe even
Yes.
if you can communicate it that way.
Yeah, communicate it here. Okay.
Also, can you explain to me then how we're compliant if the number of market rate needed to be 39.6?
Yeah.
How then are we compliant if they needed to have that for the
So
tax abatement?
Larry can talk about this language, but there is a designation allowed by the Indiana code that is substantially compliant.
Got it.
And
Okay.
What the
that's
way that I read that is that they're not deviating from
Right.
the terms of the abatement,
Right.
but that, we're finding them operating within the realm of what is acceptable.
Right.
And especially on housing, because it is, it's in constant flux, right? Like renters are coming and going.
Yeah,
This
no,
is
that
the
makes
same
sense.
thing as with the 2 vacancies.
No,
It's like,
exactly,
it's
exactly.
current, it's the snapshot at the time of the filing of
Got
this
it.
report.
Yep. Yeah, got it. I mean, yeah.
But I will try to find out.
As I was saying from the beginning, I think it's a strange thing for us to say, like, they need to get one more market rate unit,
need to get
two,
Yeah.
two,
We-
1.6.
Yeah.
Exactly, please keep asking these questions because they're exactly
But,
what
yeah,
will
but-
prepare us.
And I will just say, just presentation-wise, like, I really love the chart at the bottom. I just think it's to make it easier so that people aren't having to, like, so that 9 people aren't debating facts. I just think it's really nice to have this clear, like, this standard, here's the answer, this standard, here's the answer, this
Yeah.
standard, here's the answer.
Okay.
So you're not having to go back and forth. So on
So
the,
you don't want, you're suggesting don't go
no, I say,
standard and then
say
answer.
the standard because it's good to see, but then follow through with the standard here, right? So make it very clear, the same way that you've done compliance. You just say, no less than 70% of units, and then
Oh, okay.
say somehow show like no less than 70% of units check. Other thing, no, with a
Okay.
note, should be 1.6,
Yep.
but this is why substantially compliant, something like that.
Maybe I could just make this a 1-pager.
For example,
Okay.
exactly, and then that way too, because it's, if we're presenting so many of these and we say, yeah, we recommend all of them, and then they start picking apart one by one,
Yeah,
just thinking as well about how the last one went, and
Yeah.
like we were right, we had done the math, we had the conversation, then we sat there, and everybody was like, you didn't do the math. We're like, we did do the math, we
Correct.
promise, we just don't remember.
I have a meeting at 5:30, just to tell you.
okay, and then Urban,
I'm sorry, I'll stop.
And I have a
I'll stop.
preceding
fine.
meeting at 5:10, but I can.
I'll go-
keep
I'll
on
go
going,
faster,
Urban
Cheryl,
Station.
sorry.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sorry.
Urban-
I'm sorry.
Stop, I'm just moving you along.
I just appreciate everyone here right now for hanging with me okay, so Urban Station we approved.
Mhm.
Okay, and Woolery Mill, Dee, you might have to help with this one a little, but, so this is, beloved Woolery Mill in Bloomington. So, this
Back into it.
tax abatement was awarded in, 2004, and then an update was added, another layer was added a second abatement was added in 2013, to support the renovation and reactivation of the historic limestone mill. Public benefits that were promised on the SB1, renovation of an abandoned limestone mill into a mixed-use facility. Originally, they planned 42 apartments and condos, a 55-room hotel, and then recreational amenities and event space. So it was a planned neighborhood. They have delivered on part of this vision. I don't think that they've given up on the rest of the vision, but they haven't found the right development partner. And so the event space has been active for a while and is employing people and is pretty incredible. And I would guess that most of us have visited delayed. And they also committed to rehabilitation to the historic standards of the Secretary of the Interior. So this is just to
Really
say
good thing. Yes.
they were committing to that. Development status, Woolery completed Phase 1, the event space, in May 2019. They've met their investment and construction timeline for Phase 1. They continue to work to develop Phase 2, but have been delayed given a variety of market pressures. So we are finding them compliant with tax abatement commitments. Why are they compliant with only part of the commitments? Someone might ask.
Right.
Well, we haven't triggered the benefit for Phase 2, so they're not receiving that benefit. They're only receiving the benefit for the investments that they've made and the phase of the abatement that they've triggered. And we can see that here. So on new real estate investment, we're finding them substantially compliant because they have made almost $5 million of the $6 million investment. They're not receiving a benefit on the gap between 4.7 and 6 million. So on new employment, they're besting that number at 63 instead of 45. And then new salaries, these are paid at a range. So part-timers are paid at $15 an hour. I assume those individuals are making tips as well. Full-time is at $20 an hour. This gets to a different question that I would also anticipate coming up at council, which is how we're describing wages in the MOUs. They're required to keep up with the living wage ordinance. There was the abatement that we reviewed, New Urban Station, had a clause that accounted for cost of living increases in line with consumer price index. So that was actually pretty helpful and maybe a way to push the living wage a little higher. So something that this group might consider in future. But it's not present in this abatement, so we're finding them compliant. And the AV is $2,725,300 instead of the 4.2 million. But again, they've completed Phase 1 of the investment, so this is in line with that.
Well, should you compare like for like there?
Sorry?
Should you compare like for like of the commitment, like what you say with Phase 1? Sorry, Cheryl.
You want me to isolate the Phase 1 amount in the SB1 commitment?
Isn't that what we discussed on the earlier ones, that we wanted to compare, make sure we're comparing like for like on the assessed value as to?
Oh, you mean in this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, I'll complete that. So you want me to say that we find it substantially
I would
compliant?
think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Right?
Sorry. That's,
No, for sure.
so that's not filled out on any of the tables, and I will fill it out on the tables, so it's a given. All right. Any further questions about Woolery? Cheryl?
Yes. Not Woolery specifically, but this is a good example. I find it helpful to look at hourly salaries or annual salaries, either way,
Yes. Translate them?
rather than total salary, both for commitments and for compliance.
Well, and I'll tell you, we do too. And on this one, we weren't able to, because they have so many part-time employees, we weren't able to break that 990,000 into annual salaries, but we did get their baseline salary requirements.
Yeah.
So that's why this one's reported
was- yeah.
a little differently.
Right.
Yeah.
But I agree that annual number is relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get the initial commitment numbers. I got numbers of part-time and full-time employees, and I figured out how that
They may not have known at the
99,000.
time.
We
when
can
you
provide
need
a
it.
range. I mean, we
Yeah,
can
we can definitely
translate.
do a range for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll do that.
I just have a quick question.
Yep.
I know before we had Randy come in occasionally and would update us
Uh-huh.
on their progress. Do we know where they're at on Phase 2 at all?
I don't know, but I can find out before Wednesday, and I would be happy to invite him, and I'm sure you would be
I
happy
think that'd be
to
great,
attend.
don't you? Remember when you used to come in occasionally and just
Oh,
kind
yeah.
of update us? And
Yeah,
I just would love to hear.
yeah.
They've done a great job so far.
Can you
Thank you.
take that note for us too?
On
Okay.
it.
I'm sure he'll be here ASAP.
I mean, we could probably call him right now.
Yeah. Okay. And then,
I'll just send him a text.
His mom feeling, we're making it.
so now we have Catalent, and they have three active abatements, or they have three abatements, 1506, 1904, and 2206. So these are multiple abatements covering separate expansion phases and employee growth projections. Further down, we try to break those numbers out so that we can do an accurate comparison. The initial abatement with Cook Pharmica was assumed by Catalent as part of its 2017 acquisition. Real and personal property are phased. Employee growth is blended in Catalent's CF1s, so they're doing an aggregate reporting, and we have to work to kind of back that out for compliance. CF1 data reflects total annual payroll and year-end headcount. So I'll just go ahead and state here that Catalent experienced layoffs earlier in 2024, but what we're looking at today is compliance for the numbers at the year-end 2023.
Okay.
So,
I
yeah.
have a question about Catalent, assuming Cook Pharmica's tax abatement, and, Catalent's been sold as well now.
It
What-
hasn't been sold. They're in the, Larry, what is this phase called? It's like a.
Due diligence phase.
Yeah, due diligence phase.
So what's the
they have-
process of this takeover?
It depends, we don't know.
No, the process of
How they
abatement.
take it over. So for abatements can be taken by the interest of the other, so there's a difference here between enterprise zone credits and tax abatements.
Okay.
Abatements, when a company is sold, the new entity can step in the shoes of the old
Okay.
entity. For an enterprise zone, you actually have to have a whole, essentially a complete buyout of the company, and you have to essentially operate as the company that originally made the investment. Otherwise, you cannot transfer those investment deductions over. So that's a little bit of a difference here. So these are able, once Catalent bought out the company that Cook was operating as Cook
Yeah.
Pharmica, they were able to step into the shoes of Cook Pharmica for tax purposes. And it'll depend, I mean, one of the things, it'll just depend, the mix will depend, and going forward, if Catalent ends up being sold, it'll depend how they sell it. So if they sell it just as a stock option, they don't buy the entire assets of the company, they don't continue to operate it as a subsidiary or something like that, that may be it'll change some of their tax structure, then we'll have to review that with them.
Complicated.
Let's see. Catalent's 22 tax abatement passed February 2022, and is included in compliance assessment. Well, I don't think that's, sorry, I have a question about that. They didn't file their 322 RE.
That's right, we didn't correct this
Yeah,
before.
so that
We
needs to be
figured that out.
Okay, but we'll do it. So staff recommendation. So the headline is 1504 and 1906 are compliant with tax abatement commitments. 2206, in spite of the reduction in jobs, we find it substantially compliant, and we'll explain why as we continue.
The reduction of jobs is irrelevant for.
Well, they had reductions prior to.
I see, okay.
Prior to the end of 2023.
Okay, got it.
So again, I've left the AV off, but they exceeded new personal property investment on 1506. This is in year 6 of the abatement and is abated at a rate of 70% of the increase in assessed value. 1904, this was the build out of a 15,000 square foot manufacturing space to expand packaging. This is the building where if you're driving south on Rogers Street and you see, they've got kind of the sail, which is that limestone Catalent sign, and then on the south side of the building, there's the new property that's really beautiful, and that would be what this expansion was for. So, Dee, do you have that Adam's spreadsheet open?
think I do. Hold on. I have too many windows open.
Okay, so new real estate investment, the commitment on the SB one is 40 million. This is not looking. Sorry, I just have a question for myself about this. I'm sorry, Eldred.
While you guys are looking at it, do you mind if I go back to a topic just to clarify something on Union and Crescent, since that was a question that came up about the market rate units? It appears that the total unit count changed actually from the passage of the resolution approving the abatement to the final product. There were actually more units included. So in the resolution, there are alternative numbers. They could do 20% market rate, which they estimated at 29 units.
Okay.
So if they were supposed to do 29 units, if they took it that way, they are exceeding that amount by nine units. I will say, just as a note for everyone, the MOA, the Memorandum of Agreement, which was executed, does not contemplate that market rate unit count. So
Right.
that's not memorialized
Good.
in the MOA, so it's not part of the compliance necessarily.
That makes more sense. That makes way more sense to me.
Yeah. So sometimes that happens, and that's because the MOA typically gets executed after the resolution is approved by council. So sometimes these projects will
Okay.
change.
Can you leave that there for a second? Sure. So the investment, Catalent triggered their 2206 real estate investment early, is what I think happened, because they made $29,772,838 of investment in this building, but they reported it on their 2206. 2206 form. So it's housed in the wrong place. So this is currently recorded as they didn't file this real estate investment. We have to evaluate this the way that they filed the paperwork. They may file a correction. They should file a correction, but they did not file an extension before May 15th, which Dee and I had hoped would happen so that we could work these numbers out together. So we have to evaluate based on this form. So at this time, they're not receiving a benefit for this investment. They're claiming this investment on a different form. So for 1904, there's no benefit for real estate. They receive a benefit for the personal property investment, which they made. And then the increase in real property assessed value, obviously it's compliant, so, and then personal property assessed value is compliant and exceeded the amount.
Did I hear correctly that they did file it elsewhere?
Yeah.
So is that being counted in any of these other numbers?
Yeah,
or-
let's look down here at 2206. So they have.
Oh, I see, that's the 2206
Yes.
resolution, got it, okay.
So I think that they should not have filed for this benefit yet. And that's it.
Bye, Cheryl.
Bye, Cheryl.
I guess I can't sneak out, so. I'll kind of sneak out with apologies for going to another meeting.
The other meeting also apologizes to you. It's terrible that.
I've crossed all the wires here, but, okay, so here we have 1904 and 2206 consecutively. So this 6 million really belongs in this, would be there. But it's not, so we're going to evaluate it here, because that's what was filed.
How do you know that, like that it's?
I've been talking with their tax advisor, but the mistake was discovered after they had
I see,
filed and
okay.
submitted their forms.
Okay.
We
but then-
have questions into the county about how to handle a correction, but there's.
But then should we be giving, I'm just confused about, because the fact that if it's misfiled and then it gets applied to the other, so we're giving them a benefit to a thing
I mean,
that it doesn't apply to?
Honestly,
Or is it the same benefit at the end of the day?
it's this, yeah, go ahead, Larry.
it's not quite the same. So we might push them just to file an amendment.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would feel good about that. I just didn't have the answer from the county today about what the steps are, so.
What's our course tonight on this issue?
Yeah. Are we able to vote? We can't vote on it, can we, or should we?
I think in large part, they're still substantially compliant, even with the error
Got it.
on real estate. This would be my personal view, just looking at all these numbers, and staff can weigh in. Just looking at what they were supposed to do for the 1904, they're compliant / they well exceed all of the investments that they were supposed to make on the 1904. 2206, just in general, that they don't have to be compliant on until 2027 anyways. They don't have to reach substantial compliance until 2027.
Yeah.
Even if they're triggering it this year, they have a long lead time to kind of fill out those numbers.
Looking at 2206, then they are triggering both, but they have until, per the MOU, which is the structure of the abatement, it's the legal structure of the abatement, they have until 2027 to be compliant with capital investments and jobs.
Substantially compliant, which is 90% of the numbers that you'll see.
Okay.
So we would say they're on course. They're heading in that direction. They started.
Except for jobs.
And this slide looks at jobs. So it's pretty clear, 1506, there's only one abatement at that time, so they hit their retained employment numbers. They well exceeded their new employment numbers. Yeah.
But then they're 900 down on 2206, is that right? Am I reading that correctly?
Right. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, 2,000.
Yeah, so they're, just 2,000-ish, 1,900.
But once again, they don't have to be compliant with that until
2027. Okay. One thing I'm just, and I think I know the answer to this, but just to be very clear, when they have multiple abatements, we should view each of them separately. Like, they don't really relate to each other, right? So the excess on the others, it's not like they get to add that to the third.
It's the starting point. It's the SB one that they filed for.
Yeah, got it.
For the new one. So, so we feel like it's pretty clear that there's, like, 1506 and 1904 seem very straightforward.
Yep.
And then with 2206, the two factors are really that substantial compliance by 2027. So, so that's one factor, and then, I don't know if we want to get into this or not, but they gave us a statement kind of about another clause in the MOU, which has to do with whether the reduction was within or outside of their control. So they did do everything within their control to add those jobs because they added those jobs. And then the anticipated demand for the vaccine for which those jobs were added to create, that maybe was not grammatical. That anticipated demand dropped in a way that was just completely outside of what could be anticipated about the market. And I think I'll just set that down there. So does legal have an opinion about that?
I think it really is a 2027 discussion. I mean, one of the things we wanted to get on to do is, if you're going to make that case, and you're going to have to make that case, you should start building it now, essentially. What were the market forces that were outside of their control? Because that's the standard set in the statute that city council would ultimately have to have to find, to revoke the abatement or to invoke the memorandum of agreement. So that's kind of why we're talking about just setting up that narrative. They fell short because of the market forces, which was not something, just a business decision to streamline their business, as opposed to it was just generally what happened.
So we have, I think this is a good time for a discussion, but so there was an error in filing, Larry, that you believe is not really material?
I don't believe it's material. I mean, I think not that I don't believe it's material. I think we have to get to the bottom of it from one standpoint, which is, so for any abatement, you can't have the investment made before the abatement happens, so you can't start the investment. So if that is misreported, it's possible that the investment was before the 2022 abatement was approved, so it wouldn't be appropriate.
It'll never count then.
Yeah, it would never count.
Well,
So that's a question.
if what is reported, so looking at.
If it
just
truly is
To be
misreported.
really like crystal clear, what you're talking about is if this
Yeah.
$6.7 million investment is actually for the parcels listed on 2206, then it may not be ever approvable.
Well, it depends when they made that investment.
Yeah.
If they made it after it was approved, then it's fine. You can leave it on that form. They can claim it. That's viable. If it was made
Yeah.
before that was approved, then yes, they'll either never be able to claim it or they'll need to make an amendment to their 2019
Yeah.
form.
It's. Kurt, do you have any observations or?
Yeah, this makes sense.
So.
What Larry's saying.
Are you, I guess I'm curious what this, what this group, what action they're taking now. I mean, we're gonna then stick with our substantial compliance and compliance, knowing that together with Catalan's tax advisors, the county and ESD and the council office, that we'll work together to correct.
So Jane, could we possibly do it in 3 sections for Catalan? Compliant for resolution 1506,
Mhm.
compliant for resolution 1904, and substantially compliant with that footnote for 2206 that we were possibly looking for a amendment of the form or something like that.
Well, we should,
Yeah.
is it not substantially compliant to 1904 until they make the correction?
Well, if you look at 1904, can you go down to next, because I think you have a summary that's really good. Next slide.
Okay, here we go, sorry.
Because if you look at 1904, the CF1 is the same as what the resolution was, and with salaries, new salaries, oh, I'm sorry, I was,
That's only
No, but
salary.
here,
Salaries.
this is maybe, oh no, and then that's total.
yeah, okay, I guess we do have to go back up then.
Because that's include
Sorry.
all of the.
I was looking at salaries, but,
Yeah,
so
so then,
if you look,
But I mean, I agree with you. I'm just wondering about, like, I think that approach is right. I'm just wondering about whether you
Yeah.
can say really that they're compliant until they've made the.
do you say substantially compliant, because that's
That's
the
right.
term.
That's my point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm saying.
Okay, so we can say-
So I think it's compliant on.
we'll add the adjective for
Right.
19.
For 19.
Substantially.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay, good.
So 15 is compliant, 19 is substantially compliant, and 22 is substantially compliant with the very important footnote.
So, the only reason why I would think okay, at the time of this report, this is marked did not file, so it's neither compliant or non-compliant.
Oh, right.
Mhm.
Right.
So they're fully compliant.
So they're fully
Right.
compliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
That makes sense. Yeah. But then.
I think that's where
yeah.
I was going with that.
Right, that makes sense. That's exactly right. Okay.
And Jane made this point, but it's worth underscoring. Vanessa, you remember when we talked about this initially, it was always the personal property that was the heavy weight here,
Mhm.
Yeah.
not the
Mhm.
real property.
Absolutely.
Right.
And if
Right.
you look at the personal property, they're hitting that
That's
really
right.
hard.
Right, right. Yep.
So I would suggest we do compliant for the first 15
Uh-huh.
and 19, and then substantially for 22 with the footnote that
Mhm.
Jane and Larry have put in.
And I'm looking at Larry just to make sure that, is the footnote, like, does the footnote of us working with their tax advisors and either correcting the filing or confirming that it's acceptable or that it's correct as is that status allowable in terms of our current? I mean, it is for EDC,
Yeah.
because you're recommending to council, and then council will,
Yeah, we would want to get this kind of sorted and have some more information before we take it to council. I mean, council could still find it substantially compliant even with an error, just because of where it is in the
What
state.
if it's correct?
If it's correct, then
it's correct.
But you can still say
then there's still a
It's still
substantially
substantially, because
yeah.
Yeah.
you got
Yeah,
5 or
there's-
6 more years.
There's no error. Yeah.
Right.
So we just want to make sure that whether there's an error or not, we
Right.
actually are for sure is what I'm gathering.
Okay.
I know Jane's reasonably certain she knows way more about that, but it's.
Yeah, and to be honest, I was in meetings all day, and I would have been armed with this information if I had had even just another hour today,
Great
but,
job.
As always.
no, you guys are too nice.
Great job as always.
I'm not fishing for compliments, but I'll take
You are,
them.
Jake.
Okay, so,
This is the best discussion we've had in the years I've been on the commission with regard to this report.
I
So
will,
I really appreciate it.
glad to present imperfect reports so that we can dig in.
Right.
Okay, other questions on Catalent at this time?
Please say no, please say no, please say no.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, then the next one, retreat at Switchyard. This is a different version of, the way this process can go. They have not activated their abatement, but they filed a CF1 just to let us know what was going on. So, retreat at Switchyard. This is the affordable housing development on the east side of Switchyard Park, so along the Walnut corridor. It'll be 64 units in a 5-story building. They've had a variety of challenges with the development of this property, so I know this abatement is really significant in terms of their ability to bring these units to market. The public benefits, 48 of 64 housing units are reserved for low to moderate income residents with a period of 99 years of affordability. The remaining 16 units will be at market rate. They are partnering with Stone Belt with 10 units set aside for housing and additional service areas for Stone Belt's clients. And I should verify this, but what I remember, Larry, during the time of reviewing proposals for this development, that I think all of these units are ADA compliant. Like, that's just retreats, or that's Real America's default.
That's a good question. I do recall that discussion. I don't remember the specifics.
So I don't know if that has varied. We were looking at this, that would have been 2020 when we were reviewing proposals, but so I think that's why we don't talk about the accessibility of the Stone Belt units, because I think that they anticipate some needs for most of their clients, so, or most of their residents. So 2 new full-time permanent jobs with an estimated annual payroll of 80,000. It's not ideal. This was written during 2020, so prior to that 2022 explosion in cost of living. So I'll review the way that we account for increases. Informational only at this time. I'll correct this so that it doesn't say non-compliant, but it's just informational. But they're moving along. I'm not sure what this is.
Oh, because you just wanted to give an example
Of what the, so this just includes
credit
the
would be.
schedule of abatement.
Yeah.
Questions?
Question for Larry, just to go backwards since we're about done. Union at Crescent, Larry, you were talking about the number of units on the market rate changed.
Yeah, the overall total number of units for the
Right.
whole development changed. In the resolution that approved the abatement, it called for 28 market rate units.
Right.
It was 20% or 28 market rate units. I think, what do they have, 38 or something like that?
So I wonder if we should edit this slide where it says no less than 20% of the units will be market rate.
Right.
Yeah, we could put in parentheses or the unit count there, to reflect the resolution.
Yeah.
I think
And as I said,
that's
that's not in the MOA, so it's not clear whether they actually.
Or take it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe just
Oh, the
take it out.
20%'s not in the MOA?
It's not.
We'll strike it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that makes sense.
for sure.
I mean, we probably do want to reflect that it's a mixed rate or a mixed
Yeah.
income property, since we're not allowed to do that by other means except for when we offer a benefit like a tax abatement.
Okay.
So,
Well, Dee and I have some homework to do on the slide deck, but this is great feedback, and really helps set us up for success, when we visit council, and then we've got some recon to do and some more communicating with Catalan, but they've been available.
On slide 39, this is just a sort of delayed thought. We go from the very useful sort of separating the three
To then going all together, is the Catalan one, the last of the
Yeah,
Catalan.
Sorry, apologies for making everyone seasick.
That one, I think.
Yeah, I think this is.
Up above,
31.
that one, yeah. Is this not a little misleading, in a negative way? Like that because it's talking about all three resolutions, and then just using the employment figures from the 2206 resolution, and then saying that they haven't done that. Like it gives a picture like they're failing on all of it majorly.
Oh, interesting.
So you're saying, so that first number, SB1, should really be, that's difficult
That
because
we
It's hard,
should,
right,
we set
that
the floor
maybe
for
cut
something,
it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm just wondering if this is a useful slide, because it's
Yeah.
right, because we did have, that question I asked earlier about how
if
the
we've been
three
separating them out the whole
exactly,
time,
and
why
then
would
suddenly
we
we're
combine
like,
them?
oh wait, right?
You can't
So-
do that.
Or just be real clear up here that this is just for 2206, but then the total salaries are going to be.
I think we should strike
I
that.
think we should
Right.
strike
It's
it.
covered in the
So
previous
you
slide.
raised
It
that
is.
issue, but if you go back to the more detailed table,
That's right.
then I start worrying about, because if you look at the CF1 across all 3 years, it's 2.3, 2.4. And you wouldn't expect that to be the same, would
I
you?
guess that's what,
They
well,
are five.
because
It's
on their
just five all at the same
CF1,
time.
the CF1's request for current.
Right.
That's what I said, that's our current employment.
Yeah.
So what I recall was at the
But-
time, I think
but-
that has to do with 2019, when that resolution was approved. What my recollection was is at the time, they were wondering about how do we count our workforce for these different resolutions
Yeah.
of tax abatement, and I think they just split it in half, which is why you kind of see that uniform number between the two. I think it started there, and is a carryover now to what, that's just their current employment period.
Yeah, but that makes sense. I'm just thinking, because it's all presented perfectly well in slide 38. The only benefit that I don't actually think there's any benefit to slide 39.
Yeah, we'll just.
I don't think it
I
adds
think
any
you're right.
information that's not already
And
in
it
38.
confuses the thinking
Right.
about compliance,
Right,
so.
and again, and then the main thing we want to highlight is that 2206 is far early to make any real judgments on their compliance anyways, in real terms.
Yeah. That we're,
And then my only other thought was on 43 with for retreat on Switchard.
yeah.
Should we use the words of compliance, not compliant, if it hasn't yet been
No,
pulled?
I'm going
Yeah.
to strike that, yeah,
Awesome.
because it's really informational only. I'll cut that.
Hate to be a niggler about detail, but go back to that Catalan slide, will you please?
Yeah.
So Larry, you said that you think that they took
This one?
the 15 and 19 employment, so the real total employment was 4,648, and they split it in half, but what makes me nervous or concerns me is you got 2324 for resolution 2206.
No, I think what I was thinking is when we initially calculated what the targets were, they just split but this is clearly current employment, so I'm sorry, I think I confused the issue there. For 23-24, when we were setting out the targets of 620 employees and 1,039, they were well above 1,039 during the 2019, which is kind of how they ended up with a very high floor for the 2022. And that's where I was
Right,
referencing. So I'm thinking
because-
historically as opposed to what this slide says, and that's my apologies for interjecting.
But I'm confused because I thought we said the total employment in the resolution, they're not, so 620 was they were gonna commit to 620 employees, total employees for 15.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna commit to an additional 1,039, but the CF1 seems to be summing.
Yeah, the two together.
So we're not looking at apples and
Do you
apples.
think the resolution,
We'll
that's
have to
what I'm
look at how
saying?
they've done it in the
Well-
past, yeah.
Yeah.
do you think that's additional employees or total?
Well, if we look at 37 real quick as well,
I think the
because that actually does,
1,039 is additional.
that actually does
Okay.
bring another interesting point, right?
I thought we were stepping up in total.
Well, that's.
Well, right, so how do they, how is it,
That wasn't the case, so was the.
like,
I don't know.
shouldn't there, like, I don't understand also how they're breaking down the new employment here.
So, this is comparing, okay, so
I don't think this
resolution.
changes the compliance and.
Right.
It's
Right.
just- but
It's
somebody
about
on
is
the
it
council
presented
likes numbers
correctly?
May be asking these questions.
So this is actually what they put it
Yeah,
to. New employment versus retained.
yeah.
And so we're, in that summary slide, we're just using it for retained.
But, okay,
And the retained number is what confuses everything, so the new number,
This is whole different information.
Yeah, this is actually more insightful, to be honest with you.
so maybe
Yeah.
that other summary slide,
but then
That
shouldn't,
summary slide.
but shouldn't that number, oh, okay, is it, like,
oh, there, so you get the 3212 is the baseline number at 22. So harken back to February 22 when this abatement was approved. Pandemic hit in January 2020. They had, so 1904 was for the building that was to produce what would become the J&J vaccine, and they had scaled up. They had already had those investments planned, so they had already started scaling up. Then the pandemic hit and they scaled up even more by the time 22 hit. And so this 22 abatement is really for the ability to store and ship and manage all of that increased production from the pandemic. So that's why their baseline is at 3212 and 2022, because they had already experienced all that growth.
right. Can I play it back to you, make sure I'm understanding, because I'm the dense one here. The resolution 1506, right? They that's a point in time. They got the resolution, and they're still not in their massive stage of growth in
Right.
2015, I assume. And so they set it at 550, which now when they're filing their CF1, what they're saying is, from that time, we have retained the 550 employees that were brought on in 2015. And since that time, we've hired an additional 1,774 people, which far exceeds the 70 that we thought at the time. Then they get another tax abatement in 2019 that includes people who were already there. So now they're saying, from the 2019 point in time, we've hired an additional 1,485 people, which that's why those totals are the same, right? Our point in time count is 2,324, but they're changing when they're starting, when the start picture is taken. Is that correct?
Yeah, but, okay, Isak, your description really puts an alarm bell for me on not an alarm, but like the 1506 CF1 number of new employment of 1,774.
Right. But I think that's them saying that since 2015, they've added 1,774 new jobs.
On top of that baseline.
Right. And since 2019, on top of whatever their baseline is, they've added 1,485 jobs.
So the retained numbers are pretty clear. They're pretty straightforward because they're,
Right, that was the baseline.
and they're, it's like the Russian doll, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, like, at the end of, when they have new employment of 1,774 and their total 2324 under 1506, is it, when they come in for 1904, are they saying, we can only guarantee that we're gonna keep 839 people, but we'll add 200 more? Is that Is that correct?
That's why I'm saying I have a question about this 1774, because 550 plus 1774 conveniently makes 2324, but they didn't reduce force from 2015 to 2019.
So it does look like it's how the form is set up as opposed to
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
error. It's-
Yeah.
The form is prompting them to do it like this.
Yeah.
So this
So I
is also,
think-
because the form doesn't say total employment for the abatement, what it says is
Right.
current number of employees.
Right,
Which
right.
you would take as the addition of number of employees retained plus number of additional employees.
Right.
Which is what the CF1 says.
So
Right.
if we're looking at total employment, really in 1904 they've vested what they thought was their ceiling in 1506.
It to me looks like we should only look at the bottom row.
That makes sense. I mean, so,
I think we should hope we don't get multiple abatements
Yeah.
Yeah.
that overlap.
yeah, can we
Because
start
it gets very
consolidating, can we
confusing.
consolidate abatement?
Yeah.
And give them a master abatement.
Okay.
But the bottom
It
row
makes sense,
reflects
yeah.
reality, that they've achieved their first two abatements, and they did very well, but they're not now headed where they'd hoped to be
At this, yeah.
at 2206.
Right.
And I think where I operate is that we know that they haven't hit the numbers for 2206 yet, but their CF1 reported jobs numbers meet the requirements of the two previous abatements.
Yeah.
I mean, they exceed
And-
the requirements of the two
and-
previous abatements.
And I do think one of the relevant things of this breakdown is saying that the 2,324 people were all people that were there prior to getting the 2206 abatement.
Yeah.
So it does show- it does
But that could be
show-
the form, that could be what Larry said.
Yeah.
Because before 2206 came in, they might have only had 1,039.
I see what you're saying.
Well-
Yeah. Well,
I don't think we know.
Well, we
because
do.
it was 3,212. Because that's the floor we set, the
Where's-
retained employees is
Right.
at that point in time.
Right.
Where, do I keep passing it?
I think the other
Okay.
very important thing is that
This is where they were at the start of
Okay.
these
2020.
numbers are literally just for us. So if we kind of can come to an understanding of what their total overall goal is versus what we're
Right.
shooting for.
Right.
The specifics of how they're reporting them don't necessarily matter as much, just because it doesn't affect how much tax they're saving. It really
Yeah,
is just
that's
for
right,
us
that's
and our
right.
clients. Yeah.
Yeah, because the taxes are all based on assessed values.
Yeah.
So, I can't imagine how we wouldn't find them substantially compliant.
right. That's right. I agree.
So-
100% agree.
So we need a motion to approve this report.
With,
Right.
I would suggest that you recommend approval with the
Suggested
edits that were, the amendments
That's-
that were suggested.
That's why I was
Okay.
gonna hope somebody
course you were, yeah.
would do that. So
Also,
basically the report and then as presented with the addition of the 1506 and 1904 and 2206 being approved separately, not as an aggregate. Right?
say that one more time.
So when we go through this report, we have pieces of property, or properties, right? And we're approving the properties, but for Catalent, I would hope we have a motion that we have three separate motions for Catalent. One for the resolution 1506, one for the resolution 1904, and one for the 2206, as we stated earlier.
Yes, but all of them are still substantial.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
So here's what, if I was gonna do this, I would say, we have compliance with all the other, right? What's the word we want? We have compliance,
Yeah.
right? Compliance with all the other properties.
Yeah.
And then with Catalent, we have compliance on resolution 1506, 1904, and substantial compliance with 2206,
But don't we only need to?
with the little
Isn't it
with a little
enough, isn't it
footnote.
enough for us simply to say that we accept this report and recommendation to council with the slight sort of,
Sure, we could do it
presentation
that
of
way.
With the
right?
recommended.
We could amend it specifically for that resolution.
Whichever's cleaner for you guys.
Well, one other question, Larry, is there a difference between, there's no effective difference between compliant and substantially compliant?
No, it shouldn't be, I mean, except it's just signaling to council, there is something less than what was promised here, so just look at, but yes, the effect
So
would
we
be the
look
same.
like we're actually paying attention.
Which we are.
We actually pay more attention than a lot of cities do. I mean, it's a
Sure.
pretty thorough
Yeah.
report,
And
so.
I think wait, so did you get your motion and your?
Well, I can't make a motion because I'm the chair, so.
So I motion to accept the report with the minor corrections suggested previously, or something like that.
With all those reporting being both either compliant or substantially compliant.
Yes.
I'll second that.
You guys know what
Yeah.
the heart of this,
Mhm.
okay? Larry, you okay with that?
I am, and what we should do is when we amend the report, so whenever we do the minutes for this meeting, we should attach the amended report to show where the edits are.
Yeah,
Just to
yeah,
be
that'd be
really
great
clear,
if you could do
crystal
that,
clear.
that'd be
Yes.
perfect.
That'd be
Okay, all right. Well,
You have a
all
motion
in
and a
favor?
second?
Yes, a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We have unanimity.
Yes, one more question. I'm
You
sorry,
certainly
we're so
may.
far over time, but,
Yes.
so, one of the council members, when we were reviewing Urban Station, asked the question, why would we extend the benefit if we're only finding them substantially compliant? I believe the answer is that because they've delivered on the capital investment, which is a benefit to the community by increasing tax revenue, and they've delivered on, in that case, it was the housing units less one. So we're receiving the bulk of that benefit for our community, and we anticipate that, like if there's a finding of substantial compliance, we're working with that organization to bring them into full compliance eventually. Do you guys agree with that answer, or is there a direct response that the EDC would support me giving?
Well, I wonder what Larry would say about that. I mean, it seems like the law, substantially compliant and compliant are the same. So,
As a finding, yeah.
as a finding.
Which basically means they can continue to get their abatement.
Yeah.
And I don't think, my sense from our discussion is we did not want to take the abatement from Urban Station.
Well,
Right.
But we also want you to have some leverage as staff to work with them to
Yeah.
get them so they're fully compliant in all aspects as opposed to in just,
I also feel that the substantially compliant is kind of like us doing a check on their timeline. Like, if they're 50%, if they've gotten 50% of a certain amount, then, and they're 5 years in their 10-year abatement, then yeah, they're substantially compliant because that is the timeline that they're kind of going on within a 10-year span.
Yep.
So that's how I kind of look at the substantially as opposed to the compliant.
Yeah.
I think that's true. I think the law is meant to give the benefit unless it's a fatal error.
right.
And I think that council member was saying, like, why wouldn't we deny this? Why shouldn't we deny this?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, my answer would, if I was answering that question, if I was in your shoes, I would answer the question with first, Indiana law provides for this, and the reason is this. I think then secondly, it's pointing out that in this particular case, the only one that we have found substantially compliant and not fully compliant was one that it isn't even relevant realistically for when they need to be compliant. They still have 3 years
Yeah.
to become compliant, and
Yep.
this is being done in the spirit of like we're putting the things on the table. This is exactly why you use substantially compliant. It gives us the opportunity to start that conversation with them now,
Yeah.
3 years in advance. About hey, how do we work? And people even in this room are already working with them, saying, hey, how do we?
Yeah.
What do we do
Yeah.
here? Right?
Okay. That's really
and
helpful.
I'd be a little bit more forceful, and that's the reason I'm not an
That's
elected
right.
official, which is basically, we want to work, I mean, the whole idea of the abatements is to
Work, yeah.
foster
That's right.
economic development.
That's right.
And if
That's
somebody stubs their toe along the way, we don't want to slam them
That's right.
and take the abatement away. We want to
Right.
do what we can to encourage them to achieve what they've planned.
Right.
Because if they don't, at the end, if they're not compliant after the 10 years or wherever the time period is, we do have clawback
Right.
ability to get the money back. So I
Right.
think you point that out, that
Yeah.
we want to promote these folks to be
That's right.
successful. And we always have in our back pocket clawback if somebody really doesn't do what they need to do.
And the law anticipates that we can't predict the economy perfectly.
That's right.
3 or
That's right.
5 or 10 years out.
That's right.
Things happen.
Does that help?
Yes, that's great.
Yeah, I 100%
Yeah,
agree.
thank you.
This has
Okay.
been so helpful.
Yeah, this has been,
Yay!
this has been
Go
the best
team.
It's been great.
discussion we've had in a long, long time, so give you kudos.
I attribute it
Summer's
to, I
here.
attribute it to Olive Garden, I think.
That's right. So before any new business? No new business? Then I think we're adjourned.
Great, thank you all.
Now.